Yes, so I think you'll have a different title in your program. Essentially, I changed it because Michael and I had a few exchanges to try and choose a good title. And then he brought out the fact that some people confuse style of evangelism with the means of conversion, with methods and so on. So there'll be a long introduction, then we get to the means of conversion, okay? So first of all, I want to share with you the conversion journey as I perceive it, through experience, through extensive reading. I'm hoping to hand in a PhD soon. Depends on what mood my Bible college principal is in. So the conversion journey begins with an encounter with Christ. And that encounter takes place through means of conversion. The Bible, the church, a Christian, even a vision from the Lord. Once they have that encounter, they are subjected to two forces, a pulling force and a repelling force. A force of attraction, which comes from Jesus, from Christianity, and a force of repulsion, or a repelling force, I call repelling conversion forces. They begin to discover negative things about their faith. And then they enter what we call a contemplative phase. It's a conflict. I see that Jesus is beautiful. I see, one lady said to me, "You are better than us." She said to me, a Muslim, the mother of an immigrant boy who was raped by Muslims in Kuwait, she said to me, "Are you a Christian?" I said, "Yes." "How did you know?" She said, "It shows, you're better than us." Because I was actually touched by his story. But so there's that conflict. They recognize that Christ has something to offer, Islam doesn't. And so they begin to compare, what I call compelling comparison. They can't avoid that comparison. Comparison between Jesus and Muhammad, Christianity and Islam, the Bible and the Quran. And essentially it's a choice between giving in to fear of leaving Islam and between the beautiful joy of knowing Jesus. Eventually a decision is made to use Billy Graham's method, a decision for Christ, and that involves taking on a new identity. That's another huge subject. In my research, I've discovered in some places up to 30% of Muslim background Christians, I don't call them believers, Christians, don't feel that they're accepted as fully Christian. So we need to stop calling them believers. A believer could be any religion. B, they are actually Christian. You are no more Christian than a Muslim background Christian just because your parents claim to be Christians. So, and they have to be incorporated into this new community of believers, brothers and sisters. Now, there are consequences to conversion, and when they make that commitment, there follow consequences. Some of them are quite dire, up to death. But, there are implications such as, persecution on a personal level. They're rejected by their family and friends. They're ostracized. They're called names. They're treated like second-class citizens in Pakistan. There's career implications, and some of them have to leave their country. And then that will impact how they progress. Do they go on to grow as Christians? Some of them become amazing, effective ministers. And of course, sadly, some stagnate because they don't join a church. There isn't a church to encourage them. My cousin Rasha and I were discussing this. We have this problem in Israel. And unfortunately, some backslide. So that's the journey. I just want to concentrate on the first one, the encounter with Christianity, which is the means of conversion. We're not there yet. To understand what the means of conversion are, we need to distinguish the means from the style and from the context. At ELF, I usually join the apologetic track. And I've noticed how we often confuse. We're talking about apologetics, and yet we're actually talking about means of conversion. It's like comparing apples and pears. They're similar but not the same. So a style is a mode of doing things. For instance, you could adopt an apologetic style. You could wait for a Muslim to come and say to you, "Hey, your Bible is corrupt," and then you can go and defend that. Or you could adopt a polemic style. You could say, "Look, Muhammad slept with a young girl," and so on. That's a bit aggressive. So this is a style. The means of conversion, means are tools or instruments such as the Bible that God uses to bring, to make an encounter or provide an encounter for a seeker. Then there's the context, which we mustn't confuse, and that's the environment in which the whole thing occurs. So if the Bible is the means of conversion, to give you an example, a famous Christian from Pakistan was walking down the street once, and he saw a little piece of paper, dancing in the wind. He picked it up, and it was just a piece of one chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, and that led to his conversion. So that's the means of conversion. If the Bible is a means of conversion, it could be used in so many different styles, such as an apologetic style, as we said, a polemic style to criticize, or a charismatic style, in which you simply preach. You just start with someone, hello, my name is Emil, would you like me to tell you about Jesus? Here's John chapter 1, read. There are different ways of preaching. And then there's the context. The context can be relational. For instance, you could share the Bible with someone over 10 years, or in one encounter, a brief encounter, or in the context of a friendship. How do you witness to someone in a Muslim-majority country as opposed to a Christian country? So the context will affect how you do it. Now, I want to share what I found through my own research. I asked 40 Nigerian evangelical pastors who work with Fulani Muslims. These are Muslims who have come to know Jesus. I've asked them which style they prefer. And I've asked them to score each style from 0 to 5. So this is the average of score for every style. I've highlighted the polemic and the apologetic because if you go to conferences like these, that's often the conflict is between these two, as if there are no other styles. And in fact, I know people who've been banned from conferences because they favor the polemic, and yet the Lord has used them to bring people to Christ. So you can see that the apologetic style is much more favored by the ministers than the polemic style. Okay? Now, if you compare that with my findings of 1,600 questionnaires, Muslim background Christians completing questionnaires, I asked them what the attracting factors were and what the repelling factors were. So which aspects of Christianity drew them and which aspects of Islam repelled them. Remember the conversion journey. There are two forces at work, attraction to Christ and repulsion from Islam. But this is by the by, the person of Jesus, by far, 74% said they were attracted to Christianity because of the person of Jesus. And if you actually look at the next two that follow, religion of love, religion of forgiveness, kindness, they're still talking about the person of Jesus, not just about by comparison, the repelling factors, Islam's attitude to others, which is the opposite of the person of Jesus. But the top three in the RCF category, they're not very far from each other. 50% down to 45%. And the person of Muhammad is the third most repelling factor from Islam, compared with the person of Jesus being really by far the most powerful. So if you take the ACFs, the attracting factors, as if you like, surrogates of the polemic style, and the RCFs as surrogates of the apologetics, the other way around, the apologetic and polemic, this is what you have. So you have a ratio of 1 to 1. So these people are saying to us, the apologetic and the polemic are equally important. And they are the experts. I'm not an expert. None of these people who've written theses are experts. It's people who've gone through the conversion journey. They are the experts, and I'm listening to them. They are telling us the polemic and the apologetic are equally important, almost 1 to 1. You couldn't really fake it. I was astounded. Just a reminder compare that with what the ministers thought. The ministers favored the apologetic, probably because it's more convenient. Let's face it. Who wants to suffer? Now, I also questioned 202 Muslim background Christians from amongst the Fulani. So I've questioned their ministers, and I questioned them, and look at the polemic and the apologetic were scored almost equally the same, 2.5. So these converts are telling us, use both, they're equally good. And there's a category where they tell you you're both please combine both. So the fourth category, you combine the two of them. They so happen to favor by far the charismatic, the sort of just straightforward sharing the gospel. You don't need to criticize or defend, just say it as it is. But that's by the by. And that's putting the two views side by side, the ministers and the Muslim background Christians. And it's almost sad to see that they're almost opposites. Right, to the means of conversion, which is what the talk was supposed to be about. What is God using? What means of conversion is God using to bring people from Islam to Christ? And having questioned 1,600, I'm up to 3,000 by now, by the way, but I'm not rewriting my thesis. But whilst I'm at it, if I may do a bit of a commercial and appeal, I'm hoping to build the biggest database of 10,000 Muslim background believers or Christians, and I hope that's not too ambitious. So if any of you know any Muslim background believer or Christian, I've got the questionnaire in several languages, Arabic, I've got it in Farsi, in Urdu, in even Bahasi, and in, I forget what. But if you could pass it on to any of these, I'd be grateful. But please look, personal contact with Christians. So almost 50% of people said that God used other Christians to bring them to Christ. Are you surprised? Do you know one famous evangelist who said, agrees with this? Any offers? Billy Graham. Billy Graham said, these missions are okay, but most people come to Christ through friendship with Christians. And so it's got to be our main method. I'm going to present the results visually in the form of a graph because I'm more of a visual. And you can see the contrast. So it's a big difference. So the personal contact with Christians is by far, the rest of them are almost in the same sort of category, in the same sort of range. And there it is again. So notice that 49%, almost 50%, said that God has used personal contact with Christians to bring them to Jesus. Please note that vision, I want to, don't think visions are not that important. This is a questionnaire that did not include visions as an option. They couldn't take visions, but I had the word other, and a handful of people ticked visions. But what you asked, I wasn't even asking. There's another study, what we call a qualitative study. I interviewed 30 Muslim background believers using Christians using a semi-structured questionnaire, interview rather. And 23 out of 30 said that God dealt with them supernaturally, usually through a vision or a dream, sometimes healing. And I wasn't asking, it was an open-ended question, how did you come to Christ? So God is using visions or the supernatural in places, frankly, where there's no other means. These are people who can't read, they don't have a TV, some of them may have a radio. Thank you so much. Can you tell my voices? Thank you. By the way, feel free to stop me. I'm not one of those, if you want to ask a question, interrupt. So the fact that vision shows as, almost zero, that's irrelevant because we didn't actually offer it as an option. Now, so means of conversion, do they vary depending on certain variables, such as does age affect which means of conversion God is using, ethnicity, how religious you were as a Muslim, your gender? Do these things affect which means of conversion actually are effective in your conversion? So this is what I found. I'm sorry that the graphs look daunting, but if you take your time, just the first impression is that they broadly followed similar trends. And by far, regardless of your age group, and I want to say the 1 to 15, I think I probably had 5 or 10 at most, and the very old, maybe 50. Most of the population was between 21 to 50. By far, the commonest is personal contact with a friend. That's the commonest means of conversion. So that's confirmed. And then if you just look for outliers, maybe the grey, for instance, which is the 21 to 30s, they are more likely to attend an evangelistic campaign. If you're old and riddled with arthritis, you're probably more likely to stay at home. And also you're more sociable when you're young. You've got that desire to go and mix with people. So I think it's a good method to use for the very young. Invite them, by all means, inviting them to a campaign. Attending a church service, again, commoner amongst the younger, and it's almost as you grow older, it diminishes. At this extreme is friendship with a Christian. At the other extreme is vision or others. I will try be more detailed in my description. Right, so let's move on to gender. Should we use a different means to bring the gospel to men and women? Is there a difference? And the first thing you notice is that they're almost identical with a few exceptions. So the lines run parallel. The red is the average of the entire group of 1,600. I said 1,447 because not all of them answered this question. So the red is the average for the entire group, and then the blue is for the ladies, and what color is it? The orange is for the men, okay? You can see that there's hardly any difference, except for the ladies. They're less likely to attend an evangelistic campaign because they don't have that freedom. They have restricted freedoms. They're less likely to listen to a radio program because if they're caught listening, forget it. For a start, they don't have access to it because men have many more rights. But otherwise, they're almost identical. Is that clear? Yeah. So the next variable would be ethnicity. So do you use the same approach? Does God use the same means in Uganda or Nigeria as he does in Asia or in Iraq? And this is probably the graph where you have the greatest variation, okay? So, but still, personal contact with a Christian remains by far the most common means of conversion, regardless of ethnicity, okay? So what outliers do you see? If you look at the yellow line, the Nigerians, these are Fulani farming communities. They're relatively uneducated, virtually illiterate, but they have a good social life in the evening. In the evening, they get together. That's what they do. They share stories. So you find that they attend house meetings, yeah? So that's the yellow. You also find that they attend evangelistic campaigns because it's about gathering. It's part of their culture. They also listen to radio stations because one person may have a radio. They all gather in the evening and they listen together. Okay? But just reading the Bible, forget it. They can't read. Oh, of course, you can't see that. So it's the lowest point, the yellow point. Then you have the Middle Eastern lot, the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA, the grey, okay? They stand out in the internet and YouTube. I mean, if you ask me what a Muslim or an Arab man wants, he wants a wife, whiskey, and Wi-Fi. I don't know which order, but they must have Wi-Fi. It's, and so it's not a surprise. Any questions? I think I saw someone raise the, or were you scratching your nose? Sorry. Right. The next question is, does God use a different means of conversion for religious Muslims than from non-religious Muslims? And the answer is yes, in many respects. So a religious Muslim, which here is represented in blue, is less likely to read the Bible. Why? It's forbidden and they think it's corrupted, absolutely. They're not going to read it. Forget it. It doesn't mean you can't give it. I'm saying it's less likely to be used. But they're more likely to attend a meeting, more likely to attend an evangelistic campaign, and strangely listen to the radio. Why are they more likely to attend? Any guesses? I mean, I'm only interpreting. I mean, exactly. I don't know if you watch any of these evangelistic things on YouTube. They come to argue, so by all means, arrange evangelistic campaigns and invite those religious ones, because a lot of them get converted. So they're less likely to go on the internet and YouTube because they can't argue with the internet. Okay. And finally, is the means of conversion likely to change depending on your level of education? So should we use a different approach with those who are less educated and those who are more educated? Well, common sense says yes. I mean, if you only went to school for 2 years, you're not likely to read the Bible, are you? But there are more nuances here, I think. So attending a house meeting, you're more likely to do it if you're less educated, most likely, because you can't read. That's your only means of communication. It's talking to people. You can't read things for yourself. So you attend a house meeting. That's do we have a pointer?
We don't, but I can be your pointer.
So it's that one there. Attending a house meeting. And if you're least educated, you're more likely to listen to the radio. You're more likely to attend an evangelistic campaign. By contrast, if you look at the postgraduate, the colors aren't clear either, are they? You can see the postgraduate. That's the yellow, almost mustard color. You're more likely to read the Bible. No surprise. And if you look at reading the Bible, which is the second line, so the most educated are more likely to read it, and the least educated are least likely to read it. So I think we need to use giving out the Bibles prudently. And again, with respect to attending a meeting, the most educated, I'm not going to attend it. Yes?
What are the three very low ones? They're in all caps. They're not on the title. Can you number the third one?
The third one is a vision. You need to take that with a pinch of salt, because I didn't ask about visions. Remember, I did a separate survey in which I asked about vision. Or I didn't actually, but I gave them the opportunity to share, just an open question, and almost 75% said that they had a vision or experienced a healing. So I wouldn't set much. It's not a significant finding. It's not a reliable finding. Yeah.
What's the next two very low?
The next two very low. Listening to a street preacher, because these people live in a Muslim countries, is unlikely to happen. So those who've listened to a street preacher have been converted in Europe. And I've seen, for instance, in Vienna, there are Christian Arabs who do street preaching in the center of Vienna. Yeah. The last is just Bible correspondence courses. Unfortunately, they're going out of fashion because people use the internet. Yeah. But they're significant in places like Nigeria, because they have them on MP3s. Yeah. Okay. Is this? Oh. The next one, is that labeled? No, the next one. All right, so that's easier. Okay. So, I think it's good to be aware of what doctrines Muslims find hard to deal with. And again, let's listen to the experts. I asked 202 Muslim background Christians which doctrine they found problematic when they were in the contemplative stage of conversion. And of course, the hardest is Jesus, the Son of God, Jesus is God in the flesh, the Holy Trinity. And the Bible's, the Quran actually condemns Christians for holding on to these doctrines, and they call us kuffar, kafir, somebody who conceals the truth. But it has... Okay, so I'm just going to summarize. How do we combine means of conversion, style, and context? I'm going to give a personal preference. My personal preference is to use a questioning comparative style. So ask a question that compels the Muslim to compare between Jesus and Muhammad, or the Bible and the Quran. You know, you've read, according to your religion, you know, who's more merciful? Because the Quran says God sent Muhammad a mercy to the worlds. So in your opinion, according to the Quran, who's more merciful? It's a question, okay? Even if they don't answer you today, they will have, they're compelled, they'll go home and start thinking about it, they'll go and talk to their imam or to their mother. As one of my medical colleagues, you know, doctors are supposed to be fairly intelligent people, she had a go at the Bible, just out of the blue. And I said to her, well, actually, your Quran has been changed. She said, no, it hasn't. I said, shall I show you? You know, we'll go on the internet now, I'll show you how many. She said, no, I'll ask my mother. So, yeah. So they're bound to think about it. And, you know, you can mix styles, and you can use the Bible in different ways. You can use it to defend your faith, to criticize Islam, or to set a comparison. You can use it, you know, you can say here is a link to such a website. It will explain the Bible to you, and so on. And it can lead to other things. For instance, you could say, what do you think about Muhammad's farewell sermon? Do you think it's a good sermon? Because it's supposed to be an amazing sermon. I have a book, I don't know if I have it here. No, but I can send it, if you're interested, I can send it to you, comparing the Sermon on the Mount, which most Muslim leaders love, with Muhammad's last sermon. And I think that style works. It's, you know, we're not having a go at your religion, just compare, because you say that our religion is corrupted. You judge for yourself. Is the Sermon on the Mount not better than Muhammad's farewell sermon, which he tells you you must kill non-believers and your women are awful, and so on and so on? So I want to give you time to ask questions, so I'm going to skip to the last one. Ultimately, it's the work of the Holy Spirit. Let's not get too clever. It's the work of the Holy Spirit. One of the 30 people I interviewed, I said to him, how did you become a Christian? What drew you to Christ? And he said to me, sir, God captivated me. That's all I can say. God captivated me. And I think that's beautiful. I think we should be diligent, but we shouldn't think we're too clever. Yeah? We're not that clever. We should be diligent. We should try and work hard at how we share the gospel. But let's not forget, it's ultimately the work of the Holy Spirit. And that brings me to Psalm 96:6. Splendor and majesty are before him. And the splendor of Jesus is what pulls people to Christianity. You know, 75% of Muslim background Christians are just enthralled by the person of Jesus. So whatever style, whatever means God leads you to use, please always make sure you introduce them to the person of Jesus. Let them see the splendor of Jesus, be it by our living, by our speaking, by what we write. Make sure they hear, because they'll be captivated. And that goes beyond reason, beyond personal effort, intellect, methods, and techniques. It's the splendor of Jesus that will attract a Muslim to become a Christian. Thank you for listening. I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for the data you showed us. I wanted to ask, from your experience, how different is the approach when you have conversations with Muslims who are adult and who are young? For example, some teenagers maybe, or students. And so, are there any differences between the age groups when you have conversations and talks?
I mean, I have to say that would be a rare occurrence, because when you're young, you're not, I mean, even as an adult, you're not allowed to ask questions as a Muslim. So there's an element of fear when engaging. If my medical colleague, who's a very clever girl, a mother of a few children, dare not talk to me, you know. But when it happens, I haven't noticed. I can't say I've talked to many young, when you say teenagers, presumably up to 19. Yeah, I mean, you don't talk to kids. I've not talked to Muslim children. I can't pretend to have done. I used, when I was 16 to 18, I used to go into Muslim homes with Child Evangelism Fellowship and, just do Bible stories with pictures. And to be honest, I don't remember any questions being asked. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a difficult one to answer. What do you have? What do you think? What do you expect?
I don't know. Maybe students, for example, who are, for example, if students are educated, for example, they're going to school at university, and especially if they study on the West, and they're exposed to many cultures, other experiences,
Yeah.
and they might have more. Not difficult questions, but different questions that, for example, their parents who live at home are going to have, and maybe their parents are not that well educated and they have never thought about that, and then they start bringing up questions that are different, and yeah, that's
Well, maybe the answer is in one of the graphs, Andy, the means of conversion, for different educational levels. Maybe that reflects the sort of questions they have. So, no, maybe, yeah, so sorry, that wouldn't. So I would have to show you my thesis. So which aspects of Christianity attract them and which repel them depending on age. I do have an analysis. From memory, there isn't much difference from memory, but I can send you an answer. Yeah. Sorry, this one doesn't answer it. My mistake, yeah.
Thanks. Could I just ask about your experience of reaching people in Cardiff or in kind of Western contexts, in terms of the sort of your recommendations about the style of engagement, or these things about kind of what's most attractive or repulsive? Are there distinctives for people who are kind of perhaps second generation, Western, or do you know what I mean? Sort of more westernized Muslim backgrounds.
I think there was a time when that was definitely the case, but there's been a move towards fundamentalism recently, which unfortunately our governments are reluctant to acknowledge. And I think the older generation are less aggressive. They're probably more faithful, less aggressive. That's my personal experience. I've not done any research. So if I think back to Cardiff, I'm going back maybe 30 years. And the methods we used were mixed. So we had a stall in the local market. The pastor was an interpreter for refugees, so that was a point of contact. We provided food, clothes. We had special evenings. Food is a big thing in the Middle East. Likewise, in London, Holy Trinity Brompton, we used the same. Every Friday evening we had the church hall. We provided sports for kids to come and play, for the adults to sit down and have a meal or a drink. But there was always a 10-minute presentation at the end. That's Holy Trinity Brompton, again, going back 30-odd years. So I don't think any style, nobody could stand and say this style and only this. It's wrong. And I think you will find that God will have used a bit of polemics. They may have listened to, David Wood, who even mocks. I don't like his style, but God uses him. And they will have listened maybe to, I don't know who to name, somebody really gentle. And God uses different people. The average person has reported, I think, 3.5 means of conversion. I have a handful who only clicked one means of conversion. And and the average conversion journey was 2.2 years for a woman, 2.3 years for a man. So I think ladies, Jesus had a big following amongst the ladies. I think men's hearts are a little harder. Yeah.
Well, perhaps a bit odd question, but I remember sharing the gospel with a Muslim in London a few years ago, and we were discussing how Jesus is the Son of God, and we were discussing John 8:58, before Abraham was, I am. And I remember him showing me a few claims, a few websites that he showed me that he wanted to convince me, persuade me that Jesus was indeed not the Son of God. And after the conversation, I saw whether his claims were true or not, and they weren't. So it was like a fake website or something. And then I spoke with some of the group leaders that I was with, and they were saying that there is, among some Muslims that does dawah, there is some sort of rule of insincerity that they can have called taqiyya.
Taqiyya, yeah.
Is that broadly used? Is that something that we should be aware of?
Yeah,
and how do you deal with it? Do you accuse them?
Well, for a start, it's based on a verse from the Quran, and it used to be commoner amongst the Shiite, but the principle is this, and it's supported by the hadith, which is what Muhammad had purportedly said, that if you're in the minority, be kind and agree. When you're in majority, then you can do what you like, basically. It was widely used among the Shiites in Iraq, in the Middle East, where they're in the minority. For instance, the official line for the Shiites is the Quran is incorrect. The current Quran is not the real Quran. The Quran of Ali, who is Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, is the true Quran. But they dare not say that in public. I mean, I've seen the sheikhs on a TV program where the interviewer was showing, look, this is it. This is your most important book. It says so. Why can't you agree with it? And he would just keep deflecting. But that is employed by the Muslim evangelists. Not just them, the front men of Islam in the West. So when there's a terrorist attack, you'll see a Muslim imams come in front of the cameras and say, Islam is a religion of peace. We don't believe in violence. What they mean, so in Islam, as long as what's in your heart is true, it doesn't matter what you say, as long as it serves Islam. So to them, peace, to kill a non-Christian is not violent, okay? So to them, peace is different from your concept of peace. Killing to them is different from your concept of killing. Now, we can't claim that every Muslim practices taqiyya, but it is widely practiced amongst the evangelists, yes. It's a big problem, yeah. Yes?
About the polemics and tactics used there, like David Wood, he's pretty sometimes very, very offensive to Muslims and so forth. Do you think that scares Muslims away, or is it an effective means of evangelism? Should we be afraid of being offensive and taking a more peaceful approach, or what do you recommend?
I think we should look to the Bible for answers. Was Jesus offensive? I mean, is it nice to call people whitewashed tombs? It is, but Jesus used it. Now, does that mean we can use it? Personally, I would avoid it. Okay? And the problem is that we tend to think that when God uses us, He's actually approving of our method. God will do His work. He will use the evil to perform His purpose. So my answer really is don't use it, personally. Don't use it. Not only because it's wrong, but there's an alliance between the extreme left and Islam, and they're very good at victimhood. Very good at it. So don't give them an excuse. Yeah.